Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tech Sharmit podcast. Today, I'm here with another special guest, Ann-Grete Tan, who is speaking with us from the United States of America. Ann-Grete is a principal at Tensor Research with a career that serves as an inspiration to many of us. Over the years, Ann-Grete has trained and mentored more than 100 professionals, and as an IBM champion, she is constantly and consistently contributing to the IT industry. So, today we will dive into the journey that sparked her passion for the technology and the milestone that shaped her career. But before we start, I would like to thank Anne Grete for joining us today in this episode. And now I request you to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. You do really excellent work. Secondly, even though you say my name very well, Ann Greta, most people call me AG. So
Okay.
some people might get confused if they hear you referring to me as AG who know me. Um, yeah, so my journey to being a principal and owner of Tensor Research, I think really begins in my childhood. In my childhood, I had to deal with a lot of change because of my father's job. We were always moving. So almost every year I had to go to a new school. I had to make new friends, and it was pretty tough, but it actually taught me something very useful, which was to become comfortable with change. So I'm not so afraid, I'm not as afraid of change maybe as I might otherwise have been. And what that also did was I think it made me very open to pursuing new opportunities. So sometimes you have a plan. So for example, when I first went to university, I had a plan to study biology. I was very interested in genetics. But then in
Okay.
the first year, they forced me to do a computer science class. Now, this was the 1980s. I had no interest in computers. I really knew nothing about them. I wasn't interested at all. But I really enjoyed this class. So next thing I know, I'm doing a bachelor's degree in computer science. I'm doing a master's degree in computer science. I even started doing a PhD in computer science.
Okay.
Now, the PhD I did not finish because, a little bit into it, I realized that I had just been in school my whole life. I had gone from, high school to university to master's to PhD, and I had no real life experience. And I didn't want to spend time researching something when I did not know what the world needed, you
Okay.
know? So I left and ended up becoming a consultant, and consultants are always going to new clients. So then again, it's very useful to be open to change because you're always dealing with new people and new situations. And then eventually I came to a company called Qubit, where I worked for 14 years. And Qubit is IBM's largest planning analytics business partner in North America. And I was part of building up that team. And at
Okay.
Qubit, I was the leader of the consulting organization. And we're going to talk more about how I got involved in training new consultants. So that taught me how to become a leader and a manager. And then 2 years ago, I really started getting concerned about climate change and sustainability questions. And to be honest, even though I had a wonderful time at Qubit and I loved it, I was ready to do something new too. I guess I'm looking for change, right? And so that's when I left to become an owner and a partner at Tensor Research.
Okay. All right. So, like throughout your journey, like you have trained multiple professionals, like you have trained as well as mentored more than 100 plus professionals. So, what qualities do you think are essential for a successful uh, journey, and how do you cultivate those kind of uh, qualities in your mentees?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So first of all, so consulting ended up being the profession that I know the best, right?
Mhm.
And there are many kinds of consultants out there, and they're all very valuable because businesses, will have gaps from time to time in what they
Yes.
need, and consultants can fill those gaps. And broadly speaking, there are two kind of different flavors of consultants. There's consultants who fill staffing gaps,
Hmm.
and then there are consultants who fill expertise gaps. And so the kind of consulting I was doing was more on the expertise side.
Okay.
And let me use planning analytics consulting. I think this applies to quite a lot of technology consulting, actually, but I'm going to use the world I know, which is planning analytics. So generally speaking, if you're going in and you're going in to help a company deploy planning analytics, who are you working with? Well, you're usually working with finance people, and often you're working with, it could be any industry. So I'm not talking about banks necessarily, though I've worked with banks. I'm talking about a manufacturing company or a retailer or a bank, and they all
Mhm.
have finance departments who do the financial stuff. And they do the financial stuff often in spreadsheets and so on. And so they are, generally speaking, the customer for planning analytics. And so if you're going to go in and talk to them and understand what it is that they're dealing with, you have to understand the language of business as well
Yes.
as the language of technology, right? It's not enough to just be an expert in the technology. You have to know all of these things. And then the third thing you need as a consultant, and I would argue everybody needs in any kind of business, is what we sometimes call soft skills. At Qubit, we
Mhm.
call this consulting craft, because people are all different. Sometimes they come to work and they had a fight with their wife,
Yeah.
and they come to work and they're in a bad mood, and you don't know why they're in a bad mood.
Correct.
So the soft skills help you to communicate with people and to get past all of, what the different obstacles that come about from working with people, which is also what makes it so interesting, right? And
Correct.
so at Qubit, what we used to do was, because we wanted to grow and we wanted to grow a quality team, we started hiring young people straight out of university or people who were maybe just 1 or 2 years into their career. So they're young, they're enthusiastic. And here's the thing, though, there are very few people who have exactly that combination of skills that
Mhm.
that you're looking for. So, we tried, we put out, say, send us your resume if you know finance and you know planning analytics and you have consulting
Correct.
experience. We get very few resumes. So the way we solved that problem is we said, okay, let's look for people with aptitude and interest. And
Mhm.
then we'll teach them what they need to know, and we'll turn them into consultants. And so in doing that, what we discovered is that, if we could attract people to Qubit who had, curiosity about the world, like maybe they had studied engineering or finance, but they were
Yeah.
curious about business or technology, right? And so generally people who were curious and wanted to learn and were open to learning and were good listeners, they would generally end up being successful consultants. And then from a leadership point of view, um, the thing that I think, this was a piece of advice I got from one of my mentors, was you should always be training your replacement. You should
Okay.
never be afraid to share your knowledge. And you know
Correct.
this, right? You're sharing your knowledge all the time through your podcasts and your videos. And so you should never be afraid to share your knowledge, because that lifts up the entire team, right? And
Yes.
it pushes you to keep getting better as well, right? So I think, cultivating that sort of curiosity about the world, about how business works, how technology works, being open to sharing your knowledge and helping other people get better makes you better as well. But then the third piece of advice I would give you is, try to find a good employer. Some
Okay.
companies, don't have a great culture. Some companies is sort of like you hire somebody, even consulting companies, I've seen this. You hire a consultant, you send them out to the client, and they're on their own. And nobody is rewarded for sharing information. Most people want to share information, but if the culture doesn't reward it or makes it difficult, then it's not going
Yes.
to happen. So if you're a customer, think about that, right? If you're a customer, and you're hiring a consultant, wouldn't you rather hire a consultant who, because here's the thing, nobody knows everything. So would you
Correct.
rather hire a consultant who's working in a culture where they are always learning, and if they don't know the answer, they can at least go and find out the answer from one of their colleagues who will share with them? Or do you just want to hire a consultant who's just basically a lone wolf, even if they work in a company?
Yes.
And here's the thing, sometimes you can be lucky with your lone wolf and you can get a really genius person, but
Yeah.
most of the time you're not going to be lucky. And so generally speaking, I think those would be the main piece of advice I have. The ones you can kind of control yourself, which is your own openness to learning and listening, your sharing of knowledge. And then the third thing, don't forget you have power in going to find your employer.
Correct. And I completely agree with on this point. Like, yes, plays a vital role in our growth, not only because if let's say if someone is breaking down the morale, so they are not just putting down the morale of that employee, but the organization growth as well. So there
Yes,
should be a culture like everyone can share their thought, everyone can learn from each other. That is the only key to success,
yes,
both professional wise as well as organization wise. So
yeah,
yeah, this is something
absolutely.
that everyone should pay attention. Okay. So here, like AG, I want to ask one question because we all know that there are many professional students who are looking towards you as a mentor. But who, like throughout your career, like who would you consider as a key mentors or influences in your life, and what special attributes did they offer to you?
Ah, well, there are too many to mention, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people I have learned from. But since we're sort of a little bit in the IBM world here, we'll sort of like keep it a bit close. Well, first of all, I will mention my parents, right? My
Yes.
parents, gave me a lot of core values.
Correct.
And it's surprising actually that they found each other because my father is, Malaysian Chinese, so he's from Asia, and my mother is, a fair-skinned, blue-eyed white person from Denmark, which is in Northern
Okay.
Europe, so very far apart. But they shared a lot of core values, which came to me and my brothers. And I think one of them was, to basically treat everybody with respect. I mean, my
Mhm.
mother moved from Denmark to live in Malaysia in the countryside because my father was in the agricultural industry. And she would go to the local market where everybody else shopped, and she would talk to people and she would be comfortable there. And I went to the local schools, and so I think just that experience of just being part of the world that you're in, no matter what your background or how you feel about it, is an important core value, and it's really helped me in moving through my life. The other thing, my parents, they didn't always have a lot of money, but they never said no to these two
Right.
things. One of them was books. They never said no to books. Like if we, went to the bookstore, I could always have a book. And they never said no to any kind of sports. So if I said, I want to go and play volleyball, they said sure, and they would get me to school to play volleyball after school, and all of those things, right? So no matter what I wanted to do from a sports point of view or a books point of view, these were things that they said were important, and this kind of sits with me until today. So from a professional point of view, my main mentor was a guy called Richard Creeth. He's retired, but he's still around. I was kind of
Okay.
chatting with him just a couple of weeks ago. And Richard was the first, consultant that I worked with. So I joined his small firm, which was one of the first TM1 business partners back when planning analytics was still called TM1.
Mhm.
So TM1 first came into the world in the 1980s, and I think Richard became a business partner in around 1989 or so.
Okay.
So Richard was interesting because he was a chartered accountant from the United Kingdom. He
Mhm.
had moved to America with one of the big consulting firms, and he had actually studied applied physics in university before he
Okay.
became an accountant. So he was like this combination of somebody who knew business really well and somebody who knew technology really well. And of course, he had a big personality, or still has. I shouldn't say this. He's still around. He still has all of these things. So he has a great personality. And I saw him go and talk to CEOs and CFOs of really big companies. I mean, Fortune 500 companies, and he could go toe to toe with them about the business questions and really get to the heart of what the business question was. And then he could find these creative solutions using technology to solve those problems. And originally in his business, we didn't just work with TM1, we worked with a lot of things. We were coding in Visual Basic and DBase and Clipper, and we were using databases like Btrieve and then eventually, the Microsoft Stack, Microsoft SQL Server and analysis services. So it was like every client we had to learn a new technology. So it was very handy to have that strong technical foundation with computer
Right.
science. But eventually, the TM1 business was the main business, and it grew. And eventually, Richard decided to retire, and Keith Richmond was absorbed into Qubit, the company I was talking about earlier. And then
Mhm.
at Qubit, one of the two owners, still there, is a woman called Kathy Girac. And she
Okay.
became a mentor to me as well. In fact, I didn't even know I needed a mentor, and she sort of told me I needed a mentor, which was very useful.
Okay.
So from Richard, I had learned about the importance or that skill, that ability to combine the business knowledge and how everything you do with technology is about solving the business problem. So if you don't understand the business problem, don't even start doing the technology. And what I learned from Kathy, because in Qubit, I was leading the consulting organization. What I learned from Kathy was, first of all, about entrepreneurship. When I
Okay.
first joined Qubit, there were 30 people, and by the time I left, there were 100, close to 100, and this was all, self-funded, completely organic growth, so it's really quite an achievement. And so I learned a lot about entrepreneurship. And then maybe more importantly, I learned about people. So Kathy taught me how to become a people manager, to really understand that people need different things. Previous to that, I thought everybody was a bit like me. So what do I like? Well, I'm a bit of an introvert, believe it or not. I like to work on my own, solve my problem. I don't really want my boss to bother me. If I have a
Okay.
question, I'll go to them, but I want to be left alone. Well, I thought everybody wanted that. And it
Yes,
turns
right.
out, no, people don't all want that. Some people, if you are the boss and you don't reach out to them, people will feel like the boss doesn't care about me, you know? So Kathy helped me understand this and helped me sort of adjust and learn how to be a better manager. And then the third person I want to mention is a guy called Gary Corrigan.
Mhm.
He's a big influence on me. I learned a lot from him. So Gary Corrigan, also at Qubit, is the sales leader at Qubit. He's still there. And I knew nothing about sales. I mean, I'm a technology person, I know about business, but I don't know about sales. I thought sales was a relatively simple thing. I also thought it was something that I could never do, you know. And Gary, really taught me a lot about sales process and how there's a science to sales and how you have to go through steps and so on. And he also taught me how to really be a better networker. Networking in terms of making connections with people and so on and so forth. So I would say that Gary is another person that I've learned a lot from in my career.
Okay, all right. So thank you so much for giving shout out to all those person like who have helped you and mentored you throughout your journey. And now let's take the discussion to the technical things. So here I want to ask one thing, like you often mention this thing that IBM planning analytics as a tool can change or transform people's work life. So can you please share a specific example where you have seen this kind of transformation in action related to IBM planning analytics?
Oh, I actually, I could probably come up with lots of examples.
Okay.
But let me just take a little bit of a step back. Okay.
Mhm.
So generally speaking, I said earlier that planning analytics is a tool that is mostly used
Mhm.
by the Office of Finance, the people who work for the CFO in different industries, manufacturing, retailing, and so on and so forth, right? And so what the finance department does is, among other things, it works, with the accounting people, and it basically pulls together plans and forecasts, and then it disseminates this information throughout the organization so people
Mhm.
can make good decisions, right? So for example, if you have a plan to increase your sales by 20% a month in your department, it's very good to know to get the data that tells you, oh, you're on track to
Right.
increase your sales by 20% per month, or you're not on track. If you're not on track, then you have to figure out what you have to do about it, right? If
Right.
you don't know those things, you can't make a decision. You can't change course. You can't fix the problem.
I agree.
So the finance department is really at the root of all of that. And believe it or not, in many companies in the world, the finance department is still operating on Excel spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a good reason for this. And that reason is that business requirements are so volatile. So if you're a developer, this is what I learned at school, right? So I still remember, being a computer science student, sitting in a class, and the professors like drawing the software development life cycle, and there was
Okay.
like, you have to get the specifications, and and then you have to do your design, and then you kind of develop, and then you test, and then you see if it works, and then you iterate or whatever. Well, nowadays we talk more about agile,
Yeah, agile
but
process.
regardless, this is a process, it takes a while. And business people, like finance people with their spreadsheets, they get exposed to, frankly, ridiculous requests from their bosses.
Mm-hmm.
So the CEO or the CFO can come in one day and say, we're going to reorganize everything. We're going to restructure the company. And by Friday, I want to see what the budget will look like in the new
Okay.
structure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll come in on Monday and say that. All right. There is no time for a software development lifecycle here. There's
Correct.
no time to go and talk to IT, right? So
Yeah,
this
right.
is why spreadsheets are such a valuable tool, because a business person can take a spreadsheet and maybe they have to work long hours. Maybe, they don't get to sleep for a week, but they can get the job done. At least they can get the job done. So they
Correct.
always end up back at the spreadsheets, when they're in a pinch. Now, that's the plus of spreadsheets, because spreadsheets have that extreme flexibility. The minus is, well, lots of minuses. You can so easily make a mistake in a formula. You can so easily make a mistake in data. You have no version control. I mean, it's a little bit better now because people can share spreadsheets, in the newest versions of Office and Google. But
Mm-hmm.
it's still a bit of a problem when you have a lot of data in spreadsheets.
Right.
Who's got the right version of the data, and then you're looking at the numbers and the boss says, I don't believe these numbers. Well, then you have to prove that it's correct, and you have to go back through all your formulas and make sure there's no mistakes, right? So spreadsheets end up being a very manual, time-consuming thing where people are spending time doing stuff that's not valuable, right? Checking numbers is not valuable work. And these are smart people, right? So
Right.
planning analytics is, well, it's a lot of things, but it's basically a platform that can actually integrate with spreadsheets and
Okay.
with browser-based user interfaces and dashboards and so on. But it can integrate with spreadsheets. So the simplest way, when I want to explain planning analytics to a finance person is, imagine if you could take all that data and all those formulas out of the spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
put them in a database so you can trust that this is the true data. This is the true calculation. So you don't have to worry about mistakes anymore. But you can still use your spreadsheet to make the nice report. You can still use the
Correct.
spreadsheet to present the data, right? And you can put security on it as well. So now everybody is working from the same data, the same formulas, and now something like a reorganization becomes so much simpler because you only have to change the way things add up in the backend database, which you can do in a few seconds,
Right.
and then
Customization.
all your reports automatically are updated.
Correct.
Okay, so there's the background. So you asked, give me a specific example of how it can transform people's work life.
Yes.
So there's a utility in New England called Eversource, and I'm saying their name out loud because there's a woman called Fran Berger who worked at Eversource until last year. She retired and now she's a university professor. But Fran Berger was an IBM champion while she was
Okay.
working at Eversource, and you can actually Google an IBM Analytics Hero video that Fran Berger did.
Okay.
So I worked with Fran Berger on her first planning analytics implementation back in 2009, and she talks about this specific example. So you wanted a specific example? I give you one. You can Google and you can actually prove that
Okay.
the client actually said this. So in this example, she describes how when they used spreadsheets, there was one financial analyst every month who would spend 2 days getting the actual data prepared in the spreadsheet. Two
Okay.
full days.
Today. Mm-hmm.
After we implemented planning analytics, and that whole implementation took 3 months, okay, basically we automated the actual data load so
Mm-hmm.
that it just happened overnight. And by the way, it only took 2 minutes, okay?
Okay.
So every month, instead of somebody spending, 2 full days essentially just organizing data, that completely disappeared and was replaced by, you wake up in the morning and the data's there. And if somebody changes something over in the general ledger, the ERP system, you just press a button and 2 minutes later, everything is refreshed again. Whereas
Okay.
previously, if somebody changed numbers, because sometimes they do at month end or so on, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it would be, another number of hours to fix it. So that's my
Correct.
concrete example. 2 days, and I heard many of these kinds of examples. People say, oh, we used to have to work at the weekend just to get the data organized for all the month-end reporting. And now it's all automated. Just press a button and it's done. So that's
Okay.
a good feeling. That's it's a little bit of a drug, a consultant's drug when a client comes back and tells you that.
Okay, all right. So with this kind of explanation, I'm pretty much sure that everyone have the picture like what exactly IBM Planning Analytics do and why it is beneficial for all of us. So thanks for sharing these such a informative information and details that everyone can utilize in their day-to-day life in order to improve their work or enhance the productivity. So, what do you think, how the things are going to be impacted by AI? Because nowadays everyone is talking about AI. So, how do you see AI reshaping the role of planning software in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh yeah, that's a great question too. So I think there's in the near term, one of the things that's definitely coming. I think
Mm-hmm.
some of it may already be in the product, but I also know that there are a number of people who've basically prototyped it just for fun,
Mm-hmm.
and that is sort of natural language interaction with your planning system. So first of all, planning analytics, historically been used a lot by finance people. Finance people, they like the numbers. They want to see it in a grid. They want to see those numbers. They want to see the balance sheet. They want to see the cash flow. They want to see the income statement. They know that they're comfortable with it. But here's the thing. There are other people in the business who don't have a background in accounting and finance who
Mm-hmm.
also need this data, this information to make better decisions, right? So I think AI can help. You could use the word democratize, the data, the
Yeah.
financial data that's in the system, right? By making it easier for people to sort of get the insights. So for example, AI, and again, I've seen demonstrations of this, so this has already been built, and I think eventually it will actually be part of the product, but
Mm-hmm.
it could be done right now. Um, can do things like tell you the highlights and say, oh, you could type in natural language, how am I doing against my plan for my department? Say you could type that in, and the AI could come back and instead of showing you a grid of numbers, it
Mm-hmm.
could basically say, well, you're on track on your forecast and, relative to your forecast for these three products. However, you should look a bit more closely at this other product and by the way, your expenses are up by 20%, you know.
Okay.
And then that gives you a piece of information. So you don't have to sit and analyze the numbers or really absorb them. It gives you the key pieces of information very quickly and you can move on. So that's certainly an obvious, and natural progression. But I'd actually like to talk about the other thing. So planning analytics today, and for a couple of years now, has had Watson built in. It's officially called IBM Planning Analytics Watson. And there is a
Okay.
built-in AI capability that's basically lets you do time series forecasting on your data. So it can give you basically a first cut baseline forecast or plan based
Mm-hmm.
on your historical data, right? And it uses different statistical algorithms and it's very clever. It'll pick the best one. So let's say you want to do a revenue forecast by product, or you want to do an expense forecast, by expense account or something like that. And just with a couple of clicks, you don't have to do any coding. You don't have to know anything
Correct.
about, AI, just a couple of clicks. And basically it'll do that for you based on the history. And more recently, they've introduced multivariate forecasting, which lets you do a forecast based on more than one variable. So for example, let's say you want to know how an increase in, say, your digital marketing spending would
Mhm.
impact your sales in a particular region, right? And so you could basically say, okay, I want to do a multivariate forecast. I want to use, digital marketing spend to drive, sales, and click, 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 and it gives it to you, right? So this is really, really cool stuff. Here's the problem, though. If you don't have data to feed this, it
Right.
doesn't help.
It will
So to
not.
your question about how AI is going to transform planning, I think one of the ways, I hope one of the ways AI is going to transform planning is because people can see the possibility and the efficiencies that come from AI. But what I'm hoping it'll do is it'll make people realize that they have to pay more attention to their data,
Mhm.
and that they have to think more about their data strategy and what kinds of data really drive their business. Right now, a lot of companies limit their financial planning to just their financial data because it's easy to get. It comes out of their ERP, it's right there, pull it in, you got your data by cost center, by department, whatever it is, by account. That's great. That's better than nothing. But there are other pieces of data that also impact. And just because it's hard to get to doesn't mean that it's not valuable for your business.
Correct.
So for example, one example I would give is water. Okay,
Mhm.
now I'm starting to talk about sustainability now. But
Yeah.
let's imagine that your industry is something like agriculture or textile manufacturing, right? So these industries are very dependent on water.
Correct.
All right. And we know that, climate change is actually causing some regions to dry up,
Right.
right? So if you're planning your business, maybe it would be useful for you to have data about the water tables or the drought statistics by all the regions where you do business, where you have manufacturing, where
Mhm.
you have land, where you're planting and so on, so that you can actually see the impact over time of, the availability of water on your business.
Water.
Less, it's
Yeah.
going to cost you more money, whatever. You should close, you should move to another place, whatever it is, right? But water is not financial data, but it's
Correct.
clearly data that could be very valuable and important for your business.
Correct. Yeah. So this is one of the best example you have given here. So thanks for that. And like there are many things that we can discuss here, but just because of the limitation of time, I would like to ask one last question, and which is related to your experience at IBM Tech Exchange, because as an IBM champion you have recently attended that event. So how do you what how your experience there, like what all things you have witnessed there throughout the event?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, so the first thing was, it was my first time going to IBM Tech Exchange as an
Okay.
to not to IBM, sorry. It was my first time going to an IBM event as an IBM champion.
Okay.
And that was great because, going as an IBM champion, I had the opportunity to meet all these other IBM champions. We were all easily identifiable, walking around in our blue jackets, and they were all experts in their field. So it was just so great to meet all of them. The other thing that I really enjoyed and was so grateful for was that I got to do a presentation and the room was full,
Yeah.
and I got some really nice feedback afterwards. And it was really an opportunity to educate people on how IBM Planning Analytics, which I've talked about finance examples, can also be used for sustainability data like water, like we
Yeah.
discussed,
Right.
right? And how that can have, meaningful business experience. And of course, the third thing that I really enjoyed about Tech Exchange was, you know, IBM has a really good vision for sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the Tech Exchange conference was a lot about AI, They also had, I've been very impressed with their sustainability stack. IBM themselves use all their own technologies, so they're walking the walk. They're using Envisi and Maximo and the climate risk tool and all of those tools. And they're not just, telling customers they should use them, but they're using them themselves. And they have a very strong sustainability vision themselves. And then even on the AI space, because AI is a big concern from a sustainability point of view, because large language models, as we all know, consume huge amounts of energy. And so, on the one hand, you could say, oh, AI can save the planet. On the other hand, well, no, AI is not going to save the planet if it ends up using so much energy it burns up the planet, So IBM's actually addressing this head on, and they're they're proving that smaller, more focused large, LLMs or generative AI models can actually produce better results in specific use cases than the generic ones. And not just do these smaller models use less energy, they're less expensive, which also makes AI more available to more people, and so on. So I really like some of the vision that IBM has around generative AI, and also how it ties into sustainability.
Okay, all right. So yeah, thank you so much, Ann-Grete or AG, for joining us today in this episode and for sharing so much information related to planning analytics. And I'm pretty much sure that most of the viewers will enjoy this podcast and they will learn a lot from your experiences. So thank you once again for taking out time and for joining us today.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks.